I'm Eric Bricker, and I've been a psychotherapist for over 25 years. One thing I can tell you for certain is that no one makes it through life unscathed. At some point, many of us will rely on the trusted counsel of another person to help us navigate difficult times, or to reconcile a troubled past. Whether conventional or unconventional, professional or informal, there are a lot of different forms that helping relationships can take. This podcast is an exploration into what makes these relationships work. Who are the people that help us? How do they help us? What do people need help with? My hope is to uncover as much as I can about this very human phenomenon, and I hope that you'll join me. This is the Good Counsel Podcast. I'm Eric Bricker, and this is the Good Counsel Podcast. I am joined today by your recovery guide, Michael Herbert. Michael is a substance abuse counselor who works in private practice. He has been a clinical director. He has been an interventionist. He's done pretty much everything there is that you can do in the field of substance abuse treatment. And Michael is someone who is very well known to people. He has been working in the field for quite a while, has been a group facilitator in a number of different agencies. I know some folks, friends of mine, that have been personally affected by Michael's work. So he's a pretty well-known guy in our little corner of behavioral health care. And I am glad to have you with us, Mike. Thank you so much for joining me today.
So I prefer the title or acknowledgement of what I do as an addiction counselor and not a substance abuse counselor, because I believe addiction is bigger than any particular substance. And if I only focus on a substance, that person that comes to me isn't looking at the bigger picture of the problem. Now, of course, you probably want to, if they're smoking crack or they're drinking too much or they're engaged in addictive behavior, we want to kind of get that substance arrested, stopped, before you can go to deeper work. But in that stopping, it's some education on what addiction is, I think is helpful. Even the term people use, substance abuse disorder, for me, doesn't acknowledge the bigger picture, which is addiction. And I understand there's a stigma attached to the word addict or alcoholic that people want to run away from or don't want to acknowledge or they're uncomfortable with. Sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to get better. So I don't know that people have to be labeled an alcoholic or an addict, so to speak, but we do need to acknowledge they have an addiction problem or an alcohol problem. And substance abuse disorder, to me, at least how I hear it, talks about one thing, maybe that particular substance or a couple of substances, which doesn't fully acknowledge the bigger picture of addiction. And in addiction, when it gets down to it, at least how I see it, is there's something generally empty or missing within the person that they're filling it up with something else that gives some temporary relief to whatever the bigger problem is. And in my work, it narrows down to loneliness or isolation. When it really comes down to it, there's a good percentage of people that come in to treatment, that come into my office, that have addiction problems, that if we take away all of the drug, they're feeling lonely. If you take away the gambling, if you take away the sex, if you take away the food, what's underneath it is loneliness. And, you hear a lot of people talk about a need to connect. And how do you do that? Well, one of the ways that people do that is through 12-step program. But the same people that don't like the stigma with the name don't always like 12-step program. 12-step programs, at least how I see it, can be very, very helpful for a person to move them away from isolation, to give them some direction, to give them someone to call on a Tuesday morning at 3 a.m. where they can't call their therapist. I don't think it fixes it all. It's a piece of what people need, I think, to move forward. Now, if you can find something else that'll help you with the recovery process, then by all means do it. But you need that group or those people to help move you out of isolation and help you with the process, along with diet, exercise, some spirituality practice. I believe in meditation, I believe in journaling, or all of a part of it, but also engaging in things that maybe you dream about but don't actually do. So if you've dreamed of hiking or going on safari or deep sea fishing or jumping out of a airplane, you've got to get to a place where you start to do the things that you imagine as all a part of recovery. So I've been working in the field now for about 35 years. So I am an addiction counselor, interventionist. I do a process called structured family recovery, where I work with families, the entire family, and engaging them in the recovery process. I am an adventurer. I identify myself now as a professional athlete, meaning if you look up athlete and get the definition and professional, I meet that criteria. I mean, I don't get paid for doing what I do, but for me, I need to acknowledge the hard work that I've put into athletics for myself. And that's esteemable for me. That helps me feel better about who I am as a person. I'm a beekeeper, so I do keep bees. I'm a world traveler. What I do for a living is a part of who I am. It's not all of who I am. So when I go out and hang out with people, I'm not talking about work. I've worked with and engaged with so many people that talk about work and what they do and this theory and that period. It drives me nuts. I don't even want to be around them, because I've already worked all day. I don't want to talk about it after work. It's interesting that part of my practice, the people I work with, about 25% of them are clinicians that have relapsed and have returned to using and now are getting back into recovery. And one of the things that I've realized about this particular group is they seem to know a lot about addiction, but they know less about recovery. I think one of the things that maybe they've done that maybe hasn't helped them is they put too much emphasis on education and not enough emphasis on the practice of what recovery is. I think sometimes the difficulty, this is just how I see it, for clinicians that are working with people with addiction problems who are also in recovery is at times, some of them, or at least the ones that I worked with, haven't been able to fully engage in a recovery process because they're presenting in life as a clinician and as a therapist. And they're being the best person they can be without addressing some of the areas that they're flawed in, because they can't go out and do it, because on one breath they're representing good therapy or what recovery is, but they're actually not practicing it in their own life. And it's got a lot of people caught up. And it hasn't been my experience, but I don't know that I could ever treat someone for something that I'm engaged in currently. So I couldn't work with somebody that's drinking, smoking crack, doing heroin, and I'm doing heroin. I just don't, I just don't have that in me. It's interesting that there are people who will go on and practice their profession and they're impaired. I don't know how they do it. I personally can't do that. I'm not able to do that. So that's one piece, but also it's the understanding of what real recovery is. I think each individual has to define what that is, but I think there's some basic kind of principles that go along with, or practices that go along with, what recovery is. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Yeah, well, you said a lot, and I think any one of those points probably could be elaborated on to great degree. So let me take you back to a couple of the points. When you talk about the difference between what we're now calling substance use disorders and addiction, my thought about that is two things. One, there's an attempt sort of globally to take the stigma out of the term addiction, addict, because of the associations that people make with it. And people want to separate themselves from those associations of crime, depravity, homelessness, all those things. They want to see it as something different and that they're not a part of that world. They don't see themselves attached to that word. I think the other part of it is too that scientifically, like the National Institute of Mental Health and all of the efforts they're making to kind of define substance use disorders or redefine substance use disorder. I know that the NIDA came out with a kind of like a manifest maybe 10 years ago where they redefined substance use disorders, addiction as a brain disease. And because historically we've always viewed it as a dichotomy. You were either an addict or you were not an addict. And so it was this black and white thing. It's either you have it or you don't have it. And now I think what they're looking at with the term substance use disorder, it's like substance use disorder, mild, moderate, or severe, so that it exists on a spectrum rather than you either have it or don't have it.
And I don't disagree with any of that. I understand it's a brain disease. I believe that. But as an addict myself, and I don't know who all of these people are who've decided what is or what isn't, but I've worked with people who are non-addicts and I work with people who are addicts. The people who are non-addicts traditionally see things one way from their perspective as a non-addict, so to speak, that's different than a person who is, or at least different than how I would. I understand mild to extreme. I understand that. I see addicts fitting under that, mild to extreme. Again, I see it as a brain disease. I don't know that I see it any different than these scientists. It's the label and it's the listener in general, I think addicts, alcoholics, in using that term, are dishonest with themselves. There is no medical necessity for me to smoke crack or to drink alcohol in that way or to shoot heroin, but I still do it despite adverse consequences. I go back for more. So I'm not being honest with myself. And if that's true, I'm probably not being honest with other people. Does that mean I'm going to knock somebody over the head and steal their wallet? No. Does that mean I'm going to do any of these other criminal activities? No. But I'm neglectful maybe to my children. I show up to work not on time. I'm not fully present if I'm managing a hangover, if I'm thinking about using, or if I have a substance in my system. The extreme is always the worst thing that everybody wants to not identify with. So let's come up with a softer version.
I think if I'm understanding this correctly, part of the problem with the language, at least for you and for other people too, I've heard this argument from other folks, is that the changing in language, the softer approach to the language, in a sense, enables individuals to not look at the full scope of the potential for how bad this has gotten, or to kind of distance themselves from the severity of the condition. Because if I could say, well, I have this mild substance use disorder, this little problem, then I could mentally possibly justify continuing to use, as opposed to I'm looking in the mirror and I see a drug addict.
Well, no. If you have you can't call it mild and a problem, how I see it. If you mildly use substances, well, just go ahead and continue. But don't say it's a problem and then you get to do what you want to do. But don't say it's a problem and you're going to continue it. If it's a problem, you should probably stop.
Well, that's the issues of the language and kind of the false equivalencies of what your brain will do to justify a behavior. You know, one of the real determinants there, it's like you said, everyone has this capacity for dishonesty with themselves. And sometimes the place where you see it is really the language of saying this is a small problem, this is a moderate problem, but I'm going to continue doing it.
Well, it's just like social drinker versus it's a problem. It's a small problem. I mean, then just be a social drinker. It's not a problem. I'm a social drinker. We don't need to be a discussion. You don't even need to be in the arena around addiction if that's what it is. But usually, at least my experience is the people around me have noticed something about me before I've noticed it or fully acknowledge it. So if the people around you are concerned about your mild use of alcohol, that it causes you to slur your speech, you slip and fall, you show up late for work, you drink and drive, that needs to be looked at. If you're doing that, that's a problem. If you are truly a social drinker, then you have a couple of drinks, you put it down, you don't drink and drive. There's an interesting commercial that I heard on TV that I really liked, or I heard it on the radio. It's about buzzed driving. And in the commercial, Joe Blow, who's been smoking weed, decides, you know what? I've smoked a little weed. I'm going to get a designated driver. I've smoked too much. I'm not going to drive. I've never heard that perspective on an advertisement. It's always been the negative, the person who gets in the vehicle impaired. This is a person who smoked some weed so I think that's the difference between social and a person with a big problem, a medium problem, or a small problem. The small problem, medium, and big will still get in the car. The person without the problem says, you know what, I probably shouldn't drive. I'm going to have somebody drive me home, or I'm going to take an Uber.
It's such a subjective thing, because the person with the small problem who does get behind the wheel, overconfident, whatever, and then they get into an accident or something like that, then they get a DUI. Well, in that moment, it's no longer a small problem, right? It's considerably larger when you lose your driver's license and have a criminal record now.
And the other thing, though, that could happen and it not be a real, but if it happens a second time, somebody could smoke a joint, get in an accident. Somebody could have a couple of drinks, get in okay, it happened. You probably shouldn't have done it, blah, blah, blah. You pay your fine, you do whatever they do. But if it ever happens again, we got to do something about that, because now it's happened twice.
Well, if we don't do something about it, someone else is going to do something about it.
Yeah.
I'm never going to drive again.
Yeah. Yeah. But they say anytime a person gets a DUI, they've probably done it 50 times without being caught.
Exactly. So you play the odds and then you get caught. And that's I think what makes it so subjective, because when you look at the symptom list of mild, moderate, severe, they're very subjective, where it's, I've given up other activities to engage in substance misuse, or, it's impairing my performance at work, or I have trouble with the law, so if I've driven 49 times and not getting caught, I could say that I don't have that symptom of entanglements with the law. But the one time I do get a DUI, well, now I have this other box to check, and maybe that's the box that puts me over.
Right, but it's also the ability to acknowledge, you know what, I shouldn't be drinking and driving, and I do it anyway, versus I shouldn't be drinking and driving, and I won't. I shouldn't be drinking and driving, so the next time I won't drink and drive, but the next time I drink, I do drink and drive. That person cannot determine what the right thing to do is once they put that substance in their system. These are the people that I'm talking about that need help. These are the people who also are resistant to recovery, what recovery is. This is the clinician that identified themselves as an addict or an alcoholic, or whatever term they want to use, became abstinent, returned to using chemicals, and continues to practice. They cannot be trusted to do the right things for themselves because they know better. But once the substance is in their brain, the rules change for them.
You know a lot of people like that, people who are practicing impaired, or have known a lot of people.
I have known. My other issue with agencies is ideally what they're supposed to do is report those people. And they don't, because maybe they don't want to get in trouble by family members. My son, daughter relapsed, and Joe Blow was the therapist, and they were impaired. I want my money back. So they fire the person, but they don't report the person. Then the person goes on to another agency. I've worked at agencies where they've even hired people back that,
I think there's another fear in that too, which is if I'm an employee of a facility and I get exposed for substance misuse maybe by like a drug test or something like that. And so they have to terminate me. And really, anyone who's a licensed clinician, especially a licensed facility, really has an obligation to report impaired clinicians. You're supposed to do that. But if they do that, now I have legal engagement. Now I have a legal problem. I'm going to lose my license. I have to go up before the board. And if that somehow or other detracts from my career, if I end up losing my license, my ability to earn, I could go back, retain a lawyer, start a civil suit against the agency, claim that they disparaged me, that they said these things about me that weren't true. Now they have to prove, right, that it was true, and I could end up suing them. And I think a lot of the agencies and the organizations are so avoidant because of the fear of those things.
So what? So what? They're afraid. Be afraid and do it anyway.
You would hope so.
Because isn't this what we're teaching or trying to present to the clients who come to us around being honest? And sometimes being honest isn't easy. It takes more work. It's complicated. It's this, that, and the other. But we want people to persevere through that. But the example you gave was it's a hassle. It's going to be a problem. It's going to be this. There are lots of problems in life. Nobody gets through life without problems. I don't know if then I could define that agency as having integrity if they don't do it.
Well, it could be that some problems are more expensive than others.
Then we're moving into the bigger problem, which most people don't understand, which are is money. Money is a motivator for a lot of people to do the wrong thing. Everybody wants more than I believe they need. Why can't they just have enough? No, but we want to be the richest. We want the most properties. We want the biggest name. We want money, property, prestige, power over everything else.
What do you think is wrong with that?
I mean, you can go into lack of humility, ego, agency ego, individual ego, lack of humility, lack of integrity, dishonest. Because I think if people were more honest, practicing integrity, practicing humility, we'd probably be in a better place as a society. But everyone is afraid of losing. And so I've got to grab onto as much as I can and hold on to it just in case. People hoard money. I'm not sure why you need all of that money, all of that stuff to get. I need enough. Okay.
I think the difference is that your mentality around this is that you're not living in scarcity, that you have an abundant mindset, that there's always going to be enough of what you need. And if you keep doing what you're doing, you're all right.
Not fully. I do. I'd like to have more so I didn't have to be concerned. And I have to intellectually tell myself oftentimes, Michael, this is enough. It's not like I'm feeling it and just experiencing it isn't enough. I have to tell myself, Michael, it's enough. It's going to be okay. I'd like to get to a place where that's not a concern of mine, that I can fully live without being concerned with, am I going to be able to be okay at 80 and not wind up in some rickety-rackety nursing home?
It's the same thing. Like, I generally I'm very grateful for the position I'm in, to be in private practice, to be my own boss. I was a person who worked in agencies for a very long time, longer than I think I really wanted to, out of probably like a fear of going out on my own and, a certain apprehension about whether or not I would be successful or not. Mm-hmm. And really, this is the best position I've ever been in my life. And yet, 6 months ago, when our air conditioning went down and I had to replace the air conditioning unit for $6,000, there's that moment where it just feels catastrophic, but it's not. It's really not that big a deal. Like, you just pay for it. Like, this isn't a thing that's going to break me to where I can't retire. And it's kind of the silly sort of scarcity mindset of, oh no, they're going to take it all away, which is just, it's all in our mind. And I think some people manage that better than others. And I know a lot of very affluent people that are really like 1%ers, people that I would consider to be rich people financially, who really worry about all of this stuff.
I personally work on my recovery. So what I'm saying to you now wasn't who I was 15 years ago. This is an ongoing practice for me to get better at this. And so this is what I'm talking about. I think relapse, people return to using substances. I don't even know if I'm going to call it relapse, but a return to substance is that they haven't practiced consistently, deeply enough what recovery is. Listen, I've gone to therapy, paid a lot of money, and wasn't honest with the therapist, meaning that I wouldn't tell the therapist all of what was going on. I would go in there and say half of what was going on because I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid, you know how some people say, I don't give a shit what somebody else thinks? You know what my problem was? I gave a shit what I thought about what somebody else thought. And so I have had to learn over time to focus on me. It's not what they're thinking, it's what I think that they think. And I bring up in therapy what I think the therapist is thinking, so they can tell me, I'm not thinking that, Michael. You're thinking that. Maybe you should stop thinking that, and maybe you'll be okay. Okay, I'll stop doing that. But it's an ongoing process for me to tell the truth. I was in therapy recently, and I was saying, sometimes I feel like I waste some of the session. Well, what are you talking about? Well, I do online, and the therapist has been late for 3 or 4 minutes. Okay. If the appointment's at 10 o'clock, it's 2 minutes after 10, he's not there. I'm now thinking, where is this guy? I know it's only 2 minutes, but I'm still thinking, where is this guy? It's 4 minutes, it's 5 minutes, he's not on. And then I'm like, this guy's not here. He gets on, wow, he's there. But I still now have to recover from the anxiety that I created around him being late. Now, should he be on time all the time? In my world, yes. But he may not be for different reasons. My job is to be able to say what I need. Joe, therapist, I need you to be on time. He can tell me that, I'm making my best, but a client went over, or this happened or that happened, and I need to clear that up so I am less anxious the next time. I'm able to utilize my time in therapy more effectively, and I've been able to ask for what I need. You can't always get what you want, but you can ask for what you want or ask for what you need. And there are times that I didn't value my needs, and so I wouldn't ask for it. I don't want to ask the therapist and sound nitpicky, or I'm so needy that I need the exact amount of time I paid. You know what I mean? So all of these thoughts come up for me. And so I have to manage those thoughts, rethink those thoughts, and I need to talk openly about those thoughts so I can remove them from my mind and carry on to do the work that I need to do. That is a part of my recovery. It's those little things that build up over time that I don't address that could lead me to another place. The other thing that I get out of doing stuff like that is, wow, I'm now having a more intimate relationship with somebody because I'm telling the truth. I'm not afraid to tell the truth about even what I would call nitpicky or little things. I also said, that sometimes when we have these sessions, your lighting's not right. It annoyed me or you weren't centered in the screen. Now, those are nitpicky little things that kind of bother me a little bit, but it doesn't take away from the session. But the 2 minutes late does. Maybe not 2 minutes late, but 6 minutes late does. And so I'm able, and I'm talking about my work that I do. Somebody else's work may be different than my work, but this is how I'm describing what recovery is and what recovery is for me. These are the things that I need to do. Each individual, I guess, needs to figure out what they need to do to prevent them from, let's say, using again. Although for some people, using again might be exactly what they need to do to get into real recovery. even the definition of recovery for me needs to be thought about, well, what that is. A person going into rehab, I don't know, is their first year recovery just because they're not using? I like to say it's discovery. So it's a year of discovery to find out what's going on, this, that, and the other. And then after you put that year together or that 9 months together or that 18 months together, and you start practicing these things regularly and made this change, that you've initiated a change, and it wasn't because the rehab told you to, it's because you've made some deep decisions, then you're in recovery. Practice that for a while and then stop practicing it. Then you're in a relapse process that doesn't have to turn into relapse because you can catch it and get back into the recovery process before you pick up. But then if you pick up again, then I guess it's a relapse. And again, I don't know it all. I know what's worked for me. I've been engaged in 12-step recovery, and I know people that call their sponsor every day. They go to meetings regularly and still haven't been able to maintain abstinence. And I know people who do less and have been able to maintain abstinence. So what are those people who are doing less of the call my sponsor and go to meetings differently? Maybe they're practicing something outside of those meetings that's helping them stay that way, abstinent. It's a mystery. Who knows why anybody does what they do? But I think there are certain things that do work that need to be practiced pretty regularly.
It's difficult when you kind of zero in on the nitty-gritty of individuals, because when you're talking about people's, addicts, alcoholics, people with substance use disorders, whatever terminology we're using, talking about millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all a little different and they present differently. And I think some people have different needs than others and, that kind of thing. But your approach of looking at the unmet needs and being able to voice what they are, I think that there is so much of addiction that really is a relational issue. I think it's often said about the big book that most of those steps in there are really about relationships and having integrity in relationships, dealing with problems when they occur, keeping your side of the street clean, talking about your resentments, sharing secrets, sharing intimate secrets with other people, making amends when you've done wrong to people. I mean, those are all relational issues. Helping other people, all of those are relational things. And I think isolation, loneliness, and all of that is a huge trigger for a lot of people. I think so much so that people often don't realize when it's happening to them. And I think that often is the drift from someone who has done very well in sobriety to someone who is kind of moving closer and closer to that drink. And I think there's a liability with clinicians, as you've talked about, because some of us will look at our participation in therapy, working with clients with addiction or working in an agency treating addiction, and we'll think to ourselves, well, I'm around it all day. I'm kind of doing the things I need to do. I'm around it. I get enough reminders. I don't need to go to meetings at night.
And that also can be said about policemen and corrections officers who go wrong. They're around all of the negative all the time, and they start to pick up on it. Don't think you're so smart or so immune to, I've sat in my office with a client who started talking about their cocaine use, and I've gone into la-la land. Wow, boy, if I had that much cocaine and that much money, I'd probably still be using it. And that sounds great. If you're around, and I hope it doesn't stigmatize anyone, sickness all day, distortions all day, you've got to counter that with something other than that. Listen, I'm also around a lot of hope when I'm with people with addiction problems, hearing their stories, but I also am around a lot of the sickness. And so now I'm walking around, my spirit has, what am I going to do to kind of clean myself off from some of that stuff? So I think it's a big mistake to use your job as a part of what recovery is. It is your job. Go to work, do your job, and then leave.
I feel like that formula for people of I stopped going to meetings because I work in treatment, I'm doing these groups, I'm going to count that as my participation in recovery.
That is, I stopped going to meetings because I work in rehab, blah, blah, blah. No, if you go to, you find other meetings to go to, because again, that's your job and that's what you do for a living. Where do you go for your living? You got to go to therapy. You got to go to your meetings. You got to practice your yoga, meditation, journaling, eating right. That's your job. That'll pay your bills. You can feel good about going to work and helping people. But like we say in all of our lectures, when the oxygen mask comes down, place it on yourself first. That's the first thing they say in a family lecture. That's the first thing we need to practice.
I feel like when you're talking about clinicians, that ultimately, in many ways, you could divide them into these two categories, which is the ones that have done their work on themselves and the ones that haven't. And if you work with people like that, or you know them, and if you work side by side with them in an agency, you can usually tell the difference. The lack of self-reflection, the lack of working on oneself comes through in the forms of countertransference with clients. It comes through in the forms of easily bruised egos in the various interactions with administration. It comes through in our inability to get on with peers, and it just comes through in how you show up on a daily basis.
But I got to tell you, everything you just listed, I've experienced. I was that guy. I have been that way. And my job is, because I'm human and I have all of that negative with me, I don't come into, Mr. Healthy because I don't know that anybody is. This is what I think. I have an awareness that I can be a fucking asshole at times, that I don't get along with administration. I don't treat my peers well. There is transference, countertransference, all of that stuff. Me realizing it is part of the solution. The problem is those people who don't realize it. Like, I would go home and like, oh shit, why did I say what I feel bad about, I feel guilty. I shouldn't have said that, like I was wrong. How am I going to make this right? It's going to be hard for me to humble myself to say I apologize. So sometimes I don't apologize. Sometimes I do one of those weak kind of apologies that sort of says it. Sometimes the person doesn't even know what I did. But I think it's the awareness that's different than the person that has those traits and has those behaviors that isn't aware of it.
Yeah, and that's a huge problem for them, because if you don't have an avenue for honest self-reflection, if you're not talking to somebody else who might hold you accountable for the things that you say and do, you can rationalize doing a lot of really foul things. And that's not going to take us in a direction that's going to be very positive in our lives.
Yeah.
And I think for some folks, that is kind of that slippery slope that leads to a return to substance use. And I've heard it from a lot of people that I know who have been working in the field in varying capacities, but got into it as a recovering person and exited it as a non-recovering person, or hung around for a while. I have this philosophy about that I wanted to share since we're talking about it. I believe that when a clinician who works with people in addictions, if you're an addictions therapist, you work in a treatment center, or you're a marketer or an owner or business development or admissions or any of those things, and you relapse, there's this window that you have where if you own what you've done and you come forward with it, you're going to get help and you're going to get a lot of support from people. And pretty regularly, I've seen it come that way, that when the person owns the problem, they go to their boss, they get referred into treatment. Sometimes they get scholarshiped into the programs. Our field can be very supportive of its own, especially when someone steps up. However, if you hang around and wait around to get caught, which inevitably we do, then it's a different ball game, and your reputation, it takes such a hit. And this was a guy who practiced and did his job and was using and didn't tell anybody about it until he finally got caught, and he got caught because he was impaired at work or something like that. And for those folks returning into recovery, getting support from people, I think it's almost like a little bit harder, because there's a level of alienation that occurs, because In a sense, some people will take moral umbrage with it. You used and you were practicing and you didn't tell anybody and you were impaired and it affected clients and all this kind of stuff.
I mean, half of those people probably shouldn't even go back into the field. And it's, just do something else. You don't have to do the same thing you did. Move on. The other thing that I was reading a GQ magazine years ago, and there was a story in there about these people that were in Utah. They were out in the wilderness. They did a primitive living course. They were out in the wilderness, blah, blah, blah. I was telling my boss, I said, look at this. This sounds pretty neat. These people are living out in the desert and their only goal is food, water, and shelter. And he said to me, you interested in something like that? I said, yeah, it's an interesting article. He says, well, why don't you do it? I read about it. I never thought to do it. So I went and signed up for it. My point that I'm making is part of my recovery is doing these adventurous things that for me, life is more than work. That, listen, I bust my ass on the job. I would stay late, but I'm not going to compromise on my vacations. That I'm going to take 2 weeks off. I don't care that, but Michael, you can't. Why can't I take 2 weeks off? When I get back, the work is going to be there. I'll catch up eventually. But I need to take time off for myself. And as I've grown in recovery and I've grown in the field, I took more and more time off. I needed time off. It's not about me killing myself for somebody else. It's about me taking care of myself and giving away something that I have. I can't give away something I don't have. So I need to refuel. And how I refueled was taking time off and doing things that I needed to do. I wouldn't take staycations either. Staycation, that's not a vacation for me. I need to go away. I need to do some things. I need to forget about work. I need to get to a place where I don't want to come back to work. Reality is I have to come back, so I do come back. But I like to feel away from the work. And that I think, has really worked for me.
Well, that is a nice segue into this other thing I wanted to ask you about, African Hopeful Horizons, your charity, which really started from an experience you had while you were on one of these vacations.
Yeah, I was in Ethiopia, and I was just waiting for another group to join us. And we were in Dallol area, which is the hottest place on earth. And we were waiting, met the village leader in the town. He showed me his little village. The school had been blown over by a dust storm. Unfortunate. These kids are living in the desert. Nothing grows there. Literally nothing. It is so hot there that these children's parents, grandparents, their parents and grandparents will never experience in their lifetime a glass of ice water. Something I take for granted. I can get ice water anytime. I don't even drink ice water, but it's available to me all the time. So I told the guy there, I said, listen, if I ever come back, I'll bring some school supplies. And this was in June. By September, I was looking at my pictures again. I said, I got to go back to Ethiopia. And then I said, oh boy, I told this guy I'm going to get him school supplies. So what am I going to do here? So I did a fundraiser. And I had planned on raising $1,800. I'll buy some pens, pencils, and that kind of thing, bring them over there. And within a week, I had raised $3,000. In a shorter period of time, I had raised, over $20,000. And so I decided to create a not-for-profit because I wasn't going to bring $20,000 worth of pens and pencils. So I can do this over time. So the first trip I took 9 suitcases of pens, pencils, calculators, solar calculators, anything that I could. And I was able to go back to his school and provide them with a year's worth of educational materials, and then 2 other schools. And then that was in January. And then the following June, I did another trip and brought 9 suitcases of things to this one school and decided I would continue to work with that school. And we needed to create a lunch program because these kids aren't eating lunch. They're showing up for school, but there's no lunch. So what is a sustainable way to provide lunch for these kids? I came up with an idea. I thought it was a great idea. Get chickens. So I said, listen, if you can build a chicken coop, I'll provide you with the chickens. So they built the chicken coop. I put the roof and the windows in the chicken coop and provided them with 53 chicken.
Where'd the chickens come from?
They came from Ethiopia, a chicken farm. So we gave them the money to buy the chickens, buy the feed for the chickens. A vet checks them out. I had a woman who owned a restaurant who happened to be in recovery in Addis Ababa who also owned a chicken farm. So I flew her out to the Geralta in the Tigray region of Ethiopia to oversee the project, to make sure they were doing it correctly, everything that they needed to do. And we got it going. So right now we have the 53 chickens. I told them in 3 months, I'll get them another 50 chickens, so they'll have 100, an incubator, and build another chicken coop. So they're building the second chicken coop. I will help them out with the food for that, the windows and the ceiling, the roof for that, and get them 53 chickens. In June, I'll fly out there and oversee the project again to make sure that they're following through on the expectation that the kids get a lunch every day. They can sell the eggs to sustain the project. When they get the incubator, they can hatch and have more chickens. And we will discuss further if we're going to expand to goats. But right now we've got chicken. Right now the kids get a lunch every day. And for me, I think my goal in life, my purpose in life is to give back to others. How do you do that? Now, for years I did it through recovery, traditional recovery stuff. But now I wanted to grow and you know what? These kids don't have and won't have unless somebody is able to provide and help and support them. I can make a big difference I've made a big difference in their lives. We cemented all the school floors so they're not walking around on dirt floors. We cemented the walls. We fixed the windows. We provided desks for 127 students. Every one of them has a book bag, a calculator to use, pens, all of these things that they wouldn't have if we didn't help them with it. I can pat myself on the back for being able to help somebody, but I think it's the right thing to do in general. We all live under the same sky. I mean, through no fault of their own, they're born where they're born. I just happened to be born here in the United States, which allowed me to have X, Y, and Z that they don't have. They've got stuff that I don't have, but we want to try to balance things out. I don't know, why people have or don't have. But when you see a need, you have to either decide to ignore it, or I don't want to get involved with it, or get involved with it. It doesn't come with some of the, I don't know if I want to continue to do this anymore. They keep asking me for stuff. Of course they're going to ask. They're going to ask because they don't have it. You know what I mean? And so I have to tolerate that. But I also have to learn how to give. And you can give too much where it isn't appreciated and you're doing it for more ego than really to help people. So I have to become aware, and this is all part of recovery also, be aware of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk in recovery about service work and the importance of it. And when you look at that, it's service work in humility, right? So it's being of service to others without the adulation, without the reward of recognition.
In an ideal world, I guess, I want some recognition. It feels good to know that I've helped somebody and somebody says, Michael, thank you, but they don't always have to do it. It's nice when it happens.
It's one thing to get recognition, like to be thanked and to receive gratitude from others. I think that's sort of healthy and an acknowledgement that the efforts did pay off, like it was meaningful to the other person. And I think that's appropriate and healthy, and I think we all like that. It's another thing when you're on Facebook talking about, from a recovery standpoint, I saved more lives today. I saved another life. Well, you're looking at that and you're like, are you fucking serious? Like, did you just really say that?
It's so crazy. It's crazy because listen, I've worked with thousands, 10,000, 20,000 people, but I realize I'm only a speck of what's happened in their life. I may have been a spark to something, but there were so many other things that contributed to their success that I can't take the credit for it, just like I won't take the credit for their lack of success. It's not my fault. We've probably helped less people than we worked with. I believe in a very general way, I have helped everyone that I've worked with in some ways of right things to do and maybe not the right things to do, that whatever I've provided could possibly be helpful, just like everything that's been provided to me. I guess I could look at it as a help or a hindrance. When I look at it as a hindrance or it's negative, then I'm walking around with the burden of that negative. So if I get fired from a job, it opens a door for something that I couldn't have gotten if I stayed at a job. So maybe being fired was the best thing that could have happened for me to move on. And so I do my very best to see, so what is the opportunity that's coming to me as a result of this seemingly negative thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a healthy way to look at it, is to try to take the lessons from the things that don't work out.
It's an art. It takes work, because I can certainly find a lot of negative in a lot of things and think of how unfair that is, how poor me, but it never gets me anywhere. Feeling sorry for myself and being the victim just hasn't served me. Listen, I don't let go of resentments just like that. There are people that I think of negatively, and ideally I should let go of it, but for whatever reason haven't been able to. So I still keep, some of those people are still occupying or renting space for free in my head. So maybe the recovery is realizing it. I haven't found a solution to letting it go. There are many methods to maybe get there, but I haven't practiced those. But listen, there's still hope.
One of the things that I hear from you is, even after 35 years of work and what appears to me to be a very successful career and all of that, and to have lived this very rich life of travel and things, that you still maintain what I consider to be much of a growth mindset, where working on yourself, self-reflection, trying to grow, trying to engage new endeavors, all of that, it seems like you're always working in that direction. And I think that that's a really positive way to live one's life. That's what I'm trying to do in my own.
Yeah. Listen, I'm 65. I've never been 65 before. In this moment, how do I get through today to get to tomorrow? One of the things that I recently got a diabetic scare. Oh, the doctor told me I was diabetic after being pre-diabetic for about 12 years. So, you're 6.1, you're diabetic.
That's really surprising to me, given that you're an ultramarathon runner.
But genetics, you can't override genetics.
It must be genetic,
yeah.
Right?
So 6.1, and I'm like, oh crap, I got to do something about that, right? And so the only sugar that I had was half a spoon in my coffee. I had 3 cups of coffee a day, but I got rid of pies, cake, ice cream, cookies, candy, stopped rice, stopped pasta, stopped all of the negative. So now I'm into...
What else is left?
Well, there's protein. There, I used to have instant oats all the time, so I got the steel cut oats.
What's the difference between regular oats and steel cut?
I think one of them, listen, I'm not a scientist, but one of them burns off longer and the other one is shorter or whatever. And the quick oats are the quicker ones and the other one is used for fuel longer or something.
Gotcha. So the steel cut ones they'll keep you full longer or something.
Yeah, they'll keep you full long. I don't know what it does, but the guy told me to do it and I did it. So then I went back to the doctor 4 weeks later and I was down to 5.9. And then the doctor said, well, you actually weren't diabetic at 6.1 because 6.4 is diabetic. But good thing it scared you enough to change, because now you're 5.9. If you can get to 5.7, you won't be diabetic anymore.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So now I have 9 weeks of maintaining this diet, and I believe I can get down to 5.7, 5.6 in 9 weeks for my next test. And, I've replaced the sugar with peanut butter. I have peanut butter on crackers, all that. I thought the sugar would just be so overwhelming that I had to. But I've been able to maintain it and maintain a discipline around it. And I talk to people about it. I talk about being diabetic and pre-diabetic. To me, there was a stigma attached to diabetes. I didn't want the common man's disease, so I wouldn't talk about it. I would hide it. But now I talk openly about it, just like I don't mind telling people I'm an addict. I had an addiction problem. I have an addiction problem. The feeling comes up for me in certain situations, maybe with spending money, with having money, with shopping, I am reminded of who I am. And when I'm reminded, I have an opportunity to act on it, squash it, stop it, learn from it, and recover from it. Acting on it and squashing it are usually temporary. But learning from it, processing it, working through it is for me a longer term. So it's great to be in great shape on the outside. So I exercise a lot. Maybe I look good. But if on the inside, meaning I'm diabetic and I'm not taking care of the food aspect, where I did focus more on the aesthetic of what I looked like versus what I was putting into my system. Like there's that saying, half measures avail us nothing. I was only doing half of the work. Now I'm doing the full work. And esteem-wise, it feels great. Oh, I'm able to not have, I've got a half a gallon of strawberry ice cream in my refrigerator that's been there for 2 months.
Oh, wow.
And I haven't eaten it. And it's not like having a bottle of whiskey in your house and not drinking it. I probably will have some of that ice cream at some point, but not right now. And I'm not going to throw it away. It cost me $7 for that half a gallon. It's good ice cream. And I'm just not, I've thrown things away before, just let me throw everything out of the refrigerator. I'm going to make this change, only to go back to it. So I got that there. I'm not obsessing over it. I know it's there. I hardly ever think about it, but I do give myself permission to one day, Michael, if you want a bowl of ice cream, you can have it. So maybe if I achieve the numbers that I want, maybe I'll have it. I also know I run the risk of when I have that one bowl of ice cream that I'm going to want more. That's been my pattern. That doesn't change or hasn't changed for me. So I'm going into it knowing that maybe after the bowl, I just throw the rest of the half gallon away. Maybe that's what I'll do. I don't know what I'm going to do. But what I probably will do is in the second bowl, throw it away. It'll just be like almost like I can't not have that second bowl once I've had that first bowl, and then I'll just throw it away.
That's the thing about sugar. I think it's once you get it on board, it starts to make demands for more sugar.
It's the pleasure center of the brain. It's just like any other drug.
It is up there among the most addictive.
Well, because most people are practicing it and you can't get away. You got sugar and mustard. Mustard doesn't taste sweet, but it's in there. The other problem just in thinking about that, recovering people, is this whole vape and nicotine thing. The vaping is just out of control.
I used to be a cigarette smoker. It's been a long time now since that was a thing. And it's weird for me to see this vaping. It looks kind of silly to me, but it's definitely a thing. And I think people love it partially because they get to smoke indoors.
Well, I'm glad I never tried it. I am drawn to all of the smoke that comes out. Like, I look at that, but I also experience within me the horror of addiction when I watch somebody take a hit. And the way that they hold it, you can always tell somebody's, you go through an airport, the way they have whatever that thing is in their hand, the way they put it to their mouth, immediately that person is just vaping. And the fact that they do it where they do it reminds me of addiction. They can't not do it because they're so addicted to it. So when you think about rehab centers that allow smoking and allow vaping, what are they really doing?
Yeah, that's an interesting argument. I worked in a program that started a smoking cessation, insisted that the staff not be able to smoke on the grounds of the facility, and they started to make it a no-smoking campus and started to do smoking cessation with the clients. And ultimately, I think they kind of bent their will when the clients sort of started to demand, smoking, like they just wouldn't tolerate it.
But I'm mad. What would happen if that were the case and they said, well, okay, Joe Blow, then you can't be in our program. You can leave.
I imagine they would leave and maybe go to a program that would allow them to smoke. I think the thinking behind it at the time was there was research coming out that if you quit smoking cigarettes at the same time that you quit other substances, that you were more likely to experience sustainable recovery over the long haul. And there was efficacy research that suggested that to be true.
That if you quit at the same time?
Yeah, that if you do it all at the same time.
It works for you.
Yeah, you'd be more likely to have a sustainable recovery.
Right. I'm not sure why they don't follow through on. At the very least, every program should have a smoke cessation program within it. If they don't have that and they allow people to smoke, I think it's neglect. I don't think it's, you're a medical facility.
I think the cop-out on that is the substance abuse, the alcohol, the drugs, that's enough of a big burden for anyone to take on at one time.
Except for the opiate crisis. If we didn't have the opiate crisis, nicotine would kill more people than any other drug. And you wouldn't let somebody come in treatment with a heroin problem and said, well, you can just drink beer here. Because, you know what I mean? Because beer isn't really your problem. But you'll let somebody smoke cigarettes, the very thing that'll kill them in 20 years.
Yeah, I worked in a program a long time ago, not recently, but a long time ago, where someone came in with for real COPD symptoms in addition to alcoholism, and they were smoking there. And there were suggestions from the medical staff to quit smoking, but there was no mandate for it. And this person smoked with everybody else, and you could hear him hacking away and struggling to breathe all the time.
I wonder if you as a medical facility have to make a decision, Joe Blow, we can't treat you here based on this. There was another program in California that I really liked what they did. They had the smoking area yards away from the building. So if anybody wanted to smoke, they had to go over there to smoke. And this program's in the desert. So if you wanted to smoke, you had to isolate yourself to smoke. Sun, rain, the only place you could smoke was over there. So it created at least a deterrent for people to smoke.
Absolutely. You're on your way over to this isolated part of the program. Maybe you'll get bit by a scorpion.
Yeah, get bit by a scorpion, or it's 105 degrees there.
That'll teach you.
I used to always, in my rigid days, would say you're not in full recovery if you're smoking.
You can make a case for it. I think a lot of the people would argue against it, particularly the ones that smoke.
Well, if you understand what addiction is and the practice of addiction, when you're smoking, you're doing the exact same thing you do with cocaine or heroin or alcohol.
You are engaged in addictive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is inarguable.
Yeah. But the rate of people who smoke, the thinking was, you can't give up everything at once. And yes, you can. I mean, it's just like you're diabetic and, you get rid of the cake and ice cream, but you still eat pie or Twizzlers.
There's an element of self-honesty that's missing there.
And I'm a caffeine drinker. So even in that saying, okay, then give up the caffeine too. And my response would always be, well, if I was drinking a pot of coffee a day, that would be a problem. But if I have 2 cups of coffee, I don't think it's addiction.
Probably not.
But if I'm going to be honest with myself, my caffeine intake is I do 3 cups a day. They're 7 ounces. So 7, 14, 21. I think a Venti Starbucks is 21 ounces. I know that I drink coffee even when there are times that I don't really need to drink, or I just drink it because.
Well, I think for me with that, because I'm a coffee drinker too, a couple cups a day.
Mm-hmm.
The big test there is, well, let's see what happens if you don't drink it. And usually by midday, there's some kind of headache happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, that's withdrawal.
That is withdrawal, yeah. But I'm going to climb Mount Muru, and I have a choice of, Michael, don't drink coffee 2 days before you go to Africa, because when you're climbing the mountain, they do have coffee, but I only drink coffee with cream and sugar. I won't drink black coffee. So I'm going to go through those headaches. Or, Michael, just buy those little Cremora cups and bring those with you so you can have coffee on the hike. And that is the addict in me.
I imagine mountain climbing coffee is not the best. I'm thinking like a Sanka instant type situation.
No, I got to tell you, I was in Tanzania last year. The place that I hike with, they grow their own coffee and they grind their own coffee. They roast their own coffee. These guys will roast coffee right at the camp and then crush it up. And then we have coffee like you've never had before.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah. But I need to put my little Cremora in it, my carnation, the little cap things, and you can buy a box of them and bring them with you.
Irish cream.
No, I don't do any flavor.
You just like the straight cream flavor.
Straight cream with a half a spoon of sugar. That's what I'll do. It's, when you talk about addiction, it's my preoccupation. I'm thinking a month in advance about drinking coffee on a trip. It's my preoccupation with that substance that qualifies me, or at least how I see it, qualifies me as I am an addict.
In the last couple of years, every once in a while, I'll have a coffee, like a pour over or something. Mm-hmm. That's so good. It's so flavorful. And there's a place nearby that makes that. And it's always these Sumatras and these African coffee beans, probably similar to what you're getting there. It's so good that the barista was like, look, you really don't have to add anything to this. Just try and taste it and taste the flavors. And they're right. Like, it was delicious in its own way without the sugar. Mm-hmm. And if I could get that quality coffee or make it myself, I could see a version of it where I'm just appreciating this flavor. Because that coffee, I won't put anything in because you really get like an amazing flavor to it.
When I go to Ethiopia, they have coffee ceremonies. So a coffee ceremony is they roast the coffee, they crush it up, they cook it, and then you get these shots. And a coffee ceremony, or a proper coffee ceremony, is having 3 shots in a row. The first one is stronger, then the second one is a little weaker, and the third one, because they just add water to it and just cook it longer. And those are without sugar and cream. And that's the only time I have coffee without sugar and cream.
I bet it's delicious.
It's delicious, and it does what coffee is supposed to do for you. Gets you ready to go.
Oh, that's amazing.
It really is. And a proper coffee ceremony is the 3. So I get on my Ethiopian, friends. It's their culture, and I'm the only one that's practicing it fully. No, we got to stay for all 3. So you sit down, and you don't leave until you've had the 3 shots.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I bet it leads to a lot of lively conversation.
A lot of lively conversation. It really is fun. It's a nice tradition. I bought a clay coffee pot, and I've done it at my home, since. But it's not as fun. It feels like it needs to be in Ethiopia for it to be real, because they burn incense during the coffee ceremony, and then they put this green leaf in the coffee. It's not mint. It's something else that adds a little flavor to it as a part of the process. Yeah.
That sounds super cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming in. Do you want to give some information about your practice, like where people can get in touch with you if they wanted to work with you? Or
if you're interested in working with me, you can contact me, coachmichaelherbert.com, recoveryguide.net, and look up Michael Herbert on the internet. You'll see my 561 phone number. Just give me a call. And if you're interested in supporting the not-for-profit, which is AfricanHopefulHorizons.org, just go to AfricanHopefulHorizons.org, look at what we're doing, and if you can make a donation, that would be great. If you have things that you want to donate, gently used clothes and school items and art supplies, my next trip will be in June. Let me know, and I can make arrangements to have them picked up, and I'll bring them along with me. Art supplies, school supplies, for kids. These kids are under 11 years old. I've gone there so many times. I do not relish the idea of bringing 11 suitcases with me again.
That sounds brutal.
probably the cash donation is the best thing, or gift cards, and then I can purchase things from Office Depot and, pack appropriately. You get a bunch of shoes that'll fill up a whole suitcase, and it's hard to carry that stuff.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's where I can be reached. I also do interventions. I do about an intervention about every 6 weeks. So I usually refer a client to rehab probably once a month. I make a referral to different rehabs in the area or outside of the area. Some in California, some in Arizona, some here in Florida. Just depends on what the person needs and they're looking for.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you again for making the time.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you coming out. And any last thoughts?
No last thoughts. I think I've said everything that I wanted to say. And my assumption is when I leave here today, I won't say, oh, I forgot to say that. I think I said enough. Mm-hmm.
All right. You heard it here. Michael Herbert. He said it all.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Mm-hmm.